Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. It is time for us to do another tier list, and this time we are covering the weapons in Apex Legends Season 11. Stormpoint has shaken up the meta quite a bit, I will say, and we did see a few weapons rise and fall from previous seasons because of this new map. Of course, what weapons are best will depend on your playstyle, but we are primarily focusing on general play and use with an emphasis on dropping your opponents quickly. I'm mainly talking about the Battle Royale here, but since weapons do perform the same in Arena, you can still keep this tier list in mind if you are an Arena player. There's a ton of weapons to talk about, so let's just jump right into it with our C tier weaponry, which I deem to be weapons that are just okay. As of Season 11, I truly don't believe there are any bad or underwhelming weapons, which would have been F or D tier respectively. Starting up with C-, which is borderline pretty underwhelming, we have a weapon that I gave a little bump to this season, and this is the P2020. The P20 was a D+ weapon for me last season, but it did see a small damage buff during Season 10, which I think makes it slightly, and I mean very slightly, more competitive. It does lack one-shot potential like the Mozambique, but it can make pretty quick work of opponents if you do have a good trigger finger. If for some reason I am running the P20, it isn't as a primary, it is as a secondary. I would much rather have a weapon that deals more damage in a single hit. The P20 isn't terrible, but really it's just a transfer weapon that I will drop for pretty much anything else in the game. Because of this, it gets the bottom spot. One last thing, RIP to the hammer points. I wish they would bring him back so this gun could feel a little bit more fun to use. At a straight up C tier, we are going to have the Mozambique. In Arena, I actually love the Mozambique because it is free, it's pretty solid as a secondary, but in the BR, it's similar to the P20, and I'll take most other guns over the Beak. I will say it's probably a bit underrated if we're being honest, as you really can do a solid amount of damage with a single magazine, and the range on the Mozambique is surprisingly good. You can do a full hit at about 40 meters away if you do have some good accuracy. The Mozambique is a decent secondary weapon that if you are in a pinch, it can surprise you once in a while. Our final C tier weapon is going to be the RE45 at C+. The RE45 has a few perks that other guns lack, but overall the RE45 does suffer at range and overall damage output. While it feels like it's comparable to something like the R99, its time to kill is a bit lower and its fire rate is something like 25 to 30% lower, and its damage output per magazine is about 30% lower than the Volt. The one big thing that the RE45 does have going for it is the handling because it is a pistol. This makes running and gunning with the RE45 quite fun, and something like a longbow paired up with this can be pretty effective. I enjoy the RE45 from time to time, but overall there's much better options in the meta. Moving into the B tier category of weapons, these are guns that I deem to be pretty good or even great. First up, we are going to have the Bocek at B-. The Bocek for me was one of the hardest things to rate because really, it does have some nice perks. It's a more silent weapon, and its bullet velocity or arrow velocity is extremely high, making you able to hit targets pretty easily at range, which is weird because it's a bow. But the Bocek is just a marksman weapon, and I don't see much reason to run this bow over something like the longbow that has a higher headshot multiplier, or a triple take that also allows you to do much more overall damage. I will say that the Bocek really does not need any attachments, which can be pretty appealing in the early game, but I think the Bocek is just an okay weapon if you are looking to be a little bit of a thorn in someone's side, but it's been a little while since the Bocek was a crazy overpowered weapon. At a straight up B tier, we have a pair of sniper rifles, and this is both the Sentinel and the Charge Rifle. Both of these weapons can absolutely be higher if you are a sniper at the core, and I do think Stormpoint actually favors these guns a little bit more than the other maps. That being said, the Sentinel's reliance on being charged is its downfall for me. Having to use valuable shield cells to make the most of this weapon and at least have it be more competitive than the other mid-range guns is a little bit disappointing. This is especially the case since Stormpoint loot is a little bit harder to come by at times. Without being charged, the damage of the Sentinel over the triple take and the longbow is pretty mediocre, and I think these weapons are better suited to the meta. If you do take all this away though, running a Sentinel feels so satisfying at times, and that bolt action sniper can feel really rewarding, especially if you do pair it up with the gold armor. The second sniper is going to be the Charge Rifle, probably the best gun in the game to farm damage. It's way more reliable than some of the other snipers, but it does lack some close range utility that something like the Sentinel might have. In a more sweaty game that lasts longer, and if you are in ranked, the Charge Rifle is going to be one of the best guns out there to level up the squad's Evo shields. The Charge Rifle is also hit scan, which makes a large map like Stormpoint a breeze to tackle, as you can hit anyone from pretty much anywhere. The Charge Rifle is a solid sniper and definitely worth looking at if you are a ranked grinder. Besides the close range drawback of the Charge Rifle, it does suffer when it comes to inventory management, as I do find myself ripping through ammo very, very quickly, which can be a big deal if you don't have a bigger backpack. At B+, we are going to have a lot of different guns to talk about. We are going to start off with the 30-30 repeater. The repeater is really great at what it does best, which is the ability to really dish out reliable mid-sized damage hits very consistently. The 30 does not pack the same punch as something like the longbow or the triple take, but it can really be solid at doing consistent damage to squads. That being said, it mostly lacks some utility at closer ranges unless you do get that shatter cap pop up. But even then, I find that it isn't the best, and I would still rather run something like a shotgun. But it does work in a pinch, which is nice because it does have a little hybrid use. The 30-30, I will say, is definitely not for everyone, and it can be a pretty hard gun to get a grasp on. The 30 continues to get a lot of love from Respawn over the past few seasons, and it has gone from a gun that was really quite terrible to something that is pretty solid for what it is. Lastly, I will say that the new hop up, the dual shell, makes the reload on this weapon way better, and it will allow you to dish out even steadier stream of damage. The Devotion and Havoc are the next two set of B+ weapons, and both of these guns are extremely good weapons that can be pushed all the way up to the A+ area if you are able to get a turbocharger. Starting up with the Devotion, I will say I think that Devotion is a little bit underrated right now, and it's a little bit forgotten about since the L-Star and the Rampage have been running crazy for the past season or so, but the Devotion is honestly one of the best weapons out there, and you really shouldn't be underlooking it. The biggest flaw of the Devotion for me is the reliance on attachments, and I mean a lot of them. The turbocharger often feels like something that is a must-have on this weapon, which is a bit unfortunate as I find it's one of the hardest things to find in the game. One thing that isn't too much of a problem anymore though is energy ammo, as you can find it pretty easily now, and there's a ton of it if you are making it in the crafting machines. If you are able to get turbochargers and some attachments for both the Devotion and the Havoc, I will say both of these guns are A+ tier in my eyes. As for the Havoc, this is another weapon I find that is often forgotten about in favor of easier to use weapons like the R301, but the Havoc should be used more like an SMG, and if you can use it in this way and get a turbo, it is one of the fastest killing weapons in the game that is very, very good. I will also say that the Havoc and Devotion both have absurd magazine sizes, and this is overlooked as well. Most people shy away from the Havoc due to that insane recoil, but I would encourage everyone to try it out if you do want to switch up the way you are playing from time to time. And be sure to use that Havoc in close-range hipfire situations. It'll work out quite nicely. Next up is going to be the Hemlock. The Hemlock for the past few seasons has been an extremely reliable, great weapon that, if used properly, will work quite well. The Hemlock is much like the 30-30 though. It will not be for everyone since it is a burst gun, but it's a hybrid shooter, which for me is an extremely attractive option on Stormpoint. Pop it 3 times on this weapon and just put it into single shot mode, and you'll be able to decimate enemies at ranges that are just absurd. I think out of any of the assault rifles, the Hemlock is probably the most versatile and can be used at all ranges. The Hemlock right now is really in an odd spot where it doesn't really excel at any range, but is pretty great at all ranges. The final B+ weapon is going to be the previous S-tier reigning champion, and this is the EVA 8. At the start of Season 11, the EVA saw a fire rate nerf, and then a few days later, it received a damage per pellet reduction of 1 damage per pellet, which sounds small, but it is absolutely massive. This means a body shot EVA only does a mere 9 more damage than the Mozambique, and the Mozambique can actually do a full 45 hit from something like 40 or so meters away, like we were mentioning earlier. In my book, this alone was enough for the EVA to fall off quite a bit. It now does about half the damage of a Peacekeeper body shot. The EVA 8 has seen a lot of nerfs over the past couple seasons, and I truly believe there are way better options in this shotgun category now. I still think it is a great weapon, but having to now do 4 body shots just to kill someone with a blue armor does feel pretty bad. Not to mention, you'll need a pretty solid 3-hit to down someone with a gray armor. The EVA 8 is still pretty good. It does deserve a B+ rating, and if you are a really good shot with shotguns, it probably could be bumped up a little bit more, but it's just not quite what it was last season. If you are enjoying the video, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I truly appreciate your support. At A tier, we have the weapons I truly believe are amazing in Apex, and the first entry is going to be the new addition to this tier, and it is the Longbow at A-. The Longbow did receive a small nerf to the damage at the start of this season, but it's still a really great damage dealer that will decimate teams when hitting consistent body or headshots. The Longbow is honestly incredible with no attachments, and its base magazine size is pretty great, which makes it a decent damage farmer from the moment you pick it up. Stormpoint also favors this weapon a ton, which is also huge considering we will not be getting King's Canyon or Olympus at all this season. In addition to all of this, the G7 went into the care package, which again benefits the Longbow, The longbow is a great weapon and it rewards an accurate shooter in big ways. While it is a sniper and the bolt velocity is a little bit lower than the sentinel, it honestly feels more like a marksman weapon with the headshot multiplier in range of a sniper. Don't sleep on it, it's a really great weapon. Moving on to a straight up A tier, we have a few weapons. The first is going to be the Rampage LMG. The Rampage actually lacks a bit in the time to kill area, but it decimates at absurd ranges, and if you do throw a thermite on it, it can be pretty competitive in the time to kill aspect as well. It's also a blast breaking down doors to catch passive players off guard. The Rampage, though, really has just been a great weapon since its launch last season. Honestly, I find it to be another one of those guns that is great even with no attachments. Its biggest drawback, I would say, is also its strength, and it is that fire rate. Sometimes hitting consistent shots can be tough due to its fire rate, but at the same time, it makes this weapon a breeze to control. The Rampage is a great ranked gun if you are playing slower games, and I would give it a try. From the Rampage, we now have the new floor loot weapon, the Triple Take Marksman weapon. The Triple Take deservedly earns the best rating out of all of the marksman or sniper weapons. It's going to be the most reliable, well-rounded, and easy to use gun that can decimate even in the closer ranges. The Triple Take is so easy at farming damage, and I find it something that pretty much any player can use with some success. It does require a fair amount of precision to get big hits on enemies, but even the fact that you can do simple partial hits to the body of enemies makes the gun a great damage farmer, and it will annoy your opponents as they will have to constantly use a shield cell, even if you are only hitting one of the 3 bullets. I missed the Triple Take not being floor loot, and it never really felt like a great care package weapon to me, but it's absolutely a phenomenal floor loot gun, and you definitely shouldn't sleep on it. Our final straight up A tier weapon is going to be what I deem to be the most reliable shotgun this season, and this is the Mastiff. The Mastiff has been pretty solid for a few seasons now, and while it isn't as great as it used to be about a year ago, it's still an incredibly well-rounded weapon that can deal consistent damage, even if it is sometimes annoying hitting those 11s. The addition of the dual shell attachment also means you'll be able to once again deal consistent damage since you'll be reloading 2 shells at a time instead of 1. Even before this though, the Mastiff was one of the steadier damage dealers since you can reload partial magazines since you are putting single shells into the weapon rather than an entire magazine. While I don't think the Mastiff is as good as the Peacekeeper, I do think it's the easier to use and better well-rounded weapon that most people will have success with. Also, since it does shoot a little bit slower than something like the Eva, you can generally carry a single stack of shotgun ammo and be just fine. This does bring us to the A+ tier of weapons that are so close to being truly top of the meta. It may even be there in the hands of the right player. We are going to have the previously mentioned Peacekeeper. Generally on my tier lists, I rate weapons and legends on a dual type of system of how easy is that weapon to use to how good it actually is going to be for the majority of players. While I do think the Peacekeeper takes more skill to be successful with than the Mastiff, I truly believe with the Peacekeeper buff of the choke time, and more specifically the pellet size, makes this weapon way easier to hit some big numbers on enemies. Not only this, the Peacekeeper can be unbelievably satisfying when you are hitting those crispy headshots and decimating opponents. For most players, I do think the Mastiff will be more reliable, but for those that truly want a weapon that is one of the best secondaries, the Peacekeeper is going to be it. Our next A+ weapon is going to be the Prowler SMG. The Prowler is an insane SMG, and in the hands of a good player with a good sense of timing due to it being a burst gun, will absolutely destroy opponents. The Prowler is incredible, but because there are so many other SMGs in the game, there are a couple better options for me than the Prowler. This weapon is another one of those guns that will not be for everyone, and I think the Prowler fares better on controller than mouse and key. The only thing keeping the Prowler from S tier in my eyes is the fact that it does struggle at further sides of close ranges since it is a burst weapon, and it really isn't too great without a magazine. But if you do get a mag on this thing and are a competent shot, it's gonna wreck. Moving on from this, we do have the L-Star at A+. The L-Star is another weapon I struggled with when placing the guns on my list. Last season, this thing was busted, but this time around, it is a little bit more balanced due to the handful of nerfs it had. You used to be able to slap it 3 times on this thing and beam people at absurd ranges, but it has been toned down a bit this season with a recoil, collision size, and damage nerf. It's still a phenomenal weapon though, and those that can control it will reap the rewards. I just find that there are still some better mid-range weapons out there. The final weapon is the Wingman pistol. The Wingman is another weapon that is much like the Peacekeeper. Highly skilled players will be highly rewarded. While the wingman hits like a truck when hitting shots, it isn't going to be great for every mode, as ranked players will probably want the range reliability of something like a longbow or a triple take. However, in pubs, and for those pushing the pedal down and looking for a great time, the wingman is wildly good. I generally don't put the wingman in S tier because there are really going to be very few players that will be able to achieve the skill required with this weapon. So if you are one of them, then have at it, and I would encourage everyone to use the wingman, as the wingman will truly make you a better player overall because it is going to help you improve your accuracy. Onto the S tier weapons, we have the guns that are the best in Apex Legends and are some of the fastest killing weapons out there. The first is going to be the R99 at S-. It gets the minus rating due to the car being added to the game, and we will get to that in a minute. All that aside, the R99 is a killer SMG that is insanely good and one of the best at dropping your opponents with giving them literally no warning. It's another gun that requires a lot of skill to use, and those that have a great sense of positioning and the range at which it will be effective will be rewarded. My biggest drawback of the R99 is its range, and I truly think it's going to be tougher to use this gun in ranked when you really need more range to compete with opponents. But if you don't mind foregoing a shotgun and running the R99 as your secondary, then you will be sitting pretty well and will be able to take on pretty much anyone. At a solid S tier, we are going to now have the car SMG. I debated on whether or not I wanted to put the car and R99 in different tiers, but I do think the car gets the edge over the R99 for a couple reasons. For starters, the car does have a slight, and I mean very slight, edge in the time to kill area. It does kill opponents a little bit faster. It's pretty negligible, but for me, it's really the car's ability to use either magazine, heavy or light, and then the ability to use either ammo type. Knowing that you can use either of these mags or ammo types means you will almost always be able to get the gun geared up to being extremely effective. The other thing that the car has over the R99 is the damage per bullet. While it shoots slightly slower, it does more damage, which means you'll be able to do more damage per magazine, which means the car is going to be better with no mag, and you should have an easier time one-magging someone without any attachments. The big drawback, though, is the recoil of the car, as it's pretty high and it's a little bit harder to control than the R9. But besides that, the car is a great SMG that is very unique, and it's something that we haven't had before in the game. After this, we are going to now have the Flatline. The Flatline is pretty similar to the car, if we are being honest. It's a gun that has a fair amount of kick and rewards skilled players. The Flatline is one of, if not my favorite gun in the game right now, as I find its reliability at the both mid and close range to be really favorable. The Flatline and hipfire decimates opponents, and because it has this capability, you can really push people quite hard. The Flatline is hard to control at range, but this hybrid-esque type of weapon is pretty nice, as you know you're going to have a weapon that will be able to help you out more than something else that might struggle close up. I will say that the Flatline is probably more favorable to mouse players, as you can control the recoil a bit easier with jitter aiming, but I love the Flatline, and everyone should learn to use it and use it well. Every season, I like to put a couple guns in the S+ tier, as I believe these guns are going to be the best guns in the game. The first is going to be the tried and true R301. Seasons come, seasons go, but one thing remains constant is the R301's ability to farm players like no other weapon. If you are newer to Apex, I can absolutely recommend this gun being the gun for you to use, as it's something that you will feel comfortable with and will help you build some confidence and skill. The R301 can really do it all: close, mid, long range, tap firing, and it's really great in both pubs and ranked. And the final weapon at S+ is going to be the Volt SMG. The Volt for me sees a little bump this season, and it's really due to the size of Stormpoint and the increased availability of energy ammo. The Volt is another weapon I think everyone should be well versed in, as it's truly a great gun and something that is very easy to use. Unlike a lot of the other weapons in the game, the Volt is great with no attachments. The Volt's recoil is very manageable due to the lower fire rate, and I think this, in combination with other perks, lets you extend the range quite a bit. You can even run the Volt with a 2x bruiser and kind of use it like a hybrid AR as well. I love the Volt, it's a great gun, and pretty much everyone should be able to find some success with it. We're not quite done yet. One thing I wanted to mention was the care package weapons. I don't rate these like the others, but I truly believe they are all going to be S tier right now. The Kraber is the Kraber, the Alternator destroys shields and melts opponents, the G7 with double tap shreds, and the Spitfire has ammo for days. There's so many good guns in Apex Legends right now, which gives players a ton of options, and this means you are more or less going to be able to get something that is reliable when you are dropping. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite guns are right now, and be sure to hop into our community Discord if you want to chat with myself and the community. There's also lots of times players in there looking for other people to play with if you do want to forego playing with random players. All of my socials to my Twitter, Instagram, TikTok are all in the description down below. Till next time, everyone, happy gaming, legends.